Imagine an old, grey and very mysterious city. In this city, it almost always rains, or a fog as thick as milk hangs in the air. A cold wind wanders through the narrow streets, constantly trying to slip under the collar of your coat. Here, the houses stand so close to each other that it seems they are whispering about something important. In one of these houses, in a room with a high ceiling and a dim lamp, lived a man named Fyodor. He had a very serious gaze and deep wrinkles on his forehead because he was constantly thinking about something. When he was very little, his life was like a quiet fairy tale. Fedya grew up in a large hospital for poor people where his father worked. The boy often sat in the garden on a creaky bench and watched the passers-by. People in old clothes walked past, and each had their own story in their eyes. Fedya looked at their faces and tried to guess what they were feeling. He understood that even under the oldest and most torn jacket, a kind heart could beat. In the evenings, candles were lit in his house, and their flame trembled from the draught. His mother read interesting books aloud to the children, and the shadows on the walls turned into fairy tale giants. Books became a true salvation for Fedya and a window into a vast world. He read so many of them that the characters in the novels seemed like living friends. Fedya grew up and decided that he, too, would become a writer to tell the stories of ordinary people. But his life was not simple. It was like a real swing set. One day, something very scary and frightening happened. Young Fyodor was arrested for reading forbidden letters and wanting to make the world a better place. He was brought to a large square where it was very cold and smelled of snow. Soldiers in dark uniforms stood in straight rows, and drums beat loudly and anxiously. White bags were placed over the heads of Fyodor and his friends, and they were told that their lives were about to end. In those minutes, he looked at the golden dome of the cathedral, which glistened in the sun. He thought about how beautiful life is, and how much he had not yet had the chance to say. But suddenly, a rider galloped up and shouted that they had been pardoned. It was like a miracle, a second chance given to few. Instead of death, he was sent to distant and cold Siberia. There, heavy iron chains called shackles rattled on his legs. For 4 long years, he lived in a wooden house with other criminals. It was very crowded, smelled of smoke, and the sound of heavy footsteps was constant. He had no paper or pens to write down his thoughts. The only book he was allowed to read was the good old Bible. He read it every day, and his heart filled with light and hope. Fyodor looked at the people around him and saw that even in the worst person, there is a drop of light. He realized that no one should be judged only by their clothes or their mistakes. When the years in chains ended, Fyodor returned to his favorite foggy city. Now he knew everything about people, both how they can love and how deeply they can suffer. He would sit at his wooden desk, dip his pen into the inkwell, and begin to write. His room always smelled of strong tea and old paper. He wrote at night when the whole city was asleep and only cats roamed the rooftops. Fyodor told stories of poor students, kind girls, and greedy old men. He wanted to show that the most important thing in the world is kindness and the ability to forgive. His heroes often made mistakes, cried, and searched for their path in the darkness. But at the end of every story, a small light of love always shone. The writer believed that beauty would save the world, not just a pretty picture, but the beauty of the soul. His books began to be read all over the world because they were honest. People in different countries cried and laughed at his words. He became famous, but remained simple and humble until the end of his life. Fyodor often walked along the river embankments and watched the water flow under the bridges. He thought about how every person is an entire universe, vast and mysterious. It doesn't matter if you are rich or poor. All that matters is how much warmth you give to others. In his study, the clock he once wound still stands. It ticks just like the heart of his immortal stories. Now his books stand on the shelves of every library. If you open one of them, you will hear the sound of rain and the scratch of a pen. You will feel the cold wind of St. Petersburg blowing straight from the pages, and you will feel a little sad, but at the same time, very warm at heart. Because this serious man with wrinkles on his forehead taught us the most important thing. He taught us to notice those who are struggling and to always lend a helping hand. He taught us that even after the darkest night, morning will surely come. Fyodor's story is a story about how important it is to remain human in any situation. His life ended, but his thoughts live in each of us. When you walk down the street and see a sad passerby, remember Fyodor. Look the person in the eyes and smile at them, just because. After all, that is exactly why the great writer created his amazing books. We all need a little more light and warmth, especially when it's foggy outside. And as long as we remember his words, his candle will burn forever. In the old city, the houses still whisper and the cold water runs in the rivers. But now, this city is filled with stories that make us better and kinder.